Hello, everyone, and
Hey
welcome back
guys,
to.
hey guys, welcome back to the Freestyle Podcast. Here we go. We're gonna talk about Beowulf a little bit. Beowulf book about kind of monster. Okay, sorry, that was just me warming up. I'm loose now. Go for it.
All right,
We're not
so
cutting that out.
No, we're
welcome
keeping it.
back. If you were here for the first part of this podcast,
Who would
first
come to the
installment,
part 2 of something they didn't see the part 1 of?
That is a very good point.
I would.
You know, it actually would be interesting because you just be thrown right into it, and you decide what happened beforehand. That could be cool. We should monopolize.
You
on that.
decide, yeah. I mean, all
Like a choose your
all
own adventure
stories.
book. How do you feel about those books? Let's talk about that.
All
Wait,
books are
but
choose
it's
your
like
own
a
adventure
choose your own
books if you
adventure
try
book,
hard enough.
but you didn't even get to choose your first adventure. It would be very exciting. But continue. Harold.
Okay. Samuel, would you consider yourself more of a Grendel or a Wiglaf?
Wiglaf, 100%. Who's Oh my goodness, the baddest bee in all the sea.
In all the sea. No, he's
A
a cool
bee?
dude. No, I think I'm Grendel's mother though. And
You
attack
consider
yourself.
yourself a motherly figure.
Have you met Grendel's mother?
She's not very motherly.
Well, she goes on a killing in a matter of vengeance for her
Being
son.
defensive of your children is not motherly.
Is not
Actually,
motherly.
wait, hold on.
I was gonna say
I'm gonna sit out for that one. I withdraw my comment.
Samuel's mom. Hello. All right. So yeah, books made of paper. Let's talk about them. Matthew, what was your favorite book in high school? What was the favorite book that you were made to read in high school?
I'd say one of my teachers had us read a book that was much less. It was an easy read, and for that reason, that was one of the reasons I made it fun. It was called what was the one? It was about Ulysses the squirrel or something like that.
That sounds
Of
fake.
course.
That sounds super fake.
Ulysses
You guys-
the squirrel. Ulysses L. Grant. S.
That
Grant.
is exactly what the
Squirrel
book is
Grant?
called. Flora and Ulysses. Flora and Ulysses. It's a book that has a lot of illustrations. It's about a girl with a pet squirrel, and the squirrel is a superpowered squirrel.
This is
And-
cap.
What?
It's not
what?
Cap.
What are the?
Look it up.
What
Name
kind
the
of power?
author.
What kind of power? What kind of powers does he have?
Well, the cover of the book shows him midair, so it seems to insinuate that he has the power to fly, unless he's making a large jump.
I think that flying squirrels are a species of squirrel.
That's true, but this is not a flying squirrel. You can tell because of the anatomy of the squirrel. He doesn't have any webbing that would allow him to fly.
So I understand that the pictures in the squirrel are an obvious draw of this novella, but what really compelled you to choose it as your favorite book?
Well,
What's a novella? Can we just?
I don't know.
before we
I
get
should
into
say it
that.
was my favorite, but it was fun to have a change of pace and to approach a different book with the same style that you would for like what one might consider more advanced literature.
So you went into a deep analysis of a picture book.
It's not a picture book. It's a book with chapters. It's not a picture book. But
So-
yes, it was sort of like subtle details were analyzed more deeply than someone in fourth grade might have.
Guys,
A book with
I'm so
chapters, I
sorry.
see.
I'm so sorry, but this does sound like an interesting book. But can I just read you? So, because I've never read the book, and I wanted to be prepared for this
Sure.
discussion,
Of
I
course.
looked up a description, and I just thought that to enlighten you all, I would read the first couple sentences here. It begins, as the best superhero stories do, with a tragic accident that has unexpected consequences. The squirrel never saw the vacuum cleaner coming.
Mm-hmm.
But self-described cynic Flora Bell Buckman, who has read every issue of the comic book Terrible Things Can Happen to You, exclamation point, is just the right person to step in and save him. What neither can predict is that Ulysses, the squirrel, in brackets, because we didn't know already, has been born anew with powers of strength, flight, and misspelled poetry. And that Flora will be changed too, as she discovers the possibility of hope and the promise of a capacious heart.
Interesting, the word capacious. A curious piece of language. But anyway. So, can I pose a hypothetical, Matthew?
Sure.
hypothetically, if you were to omit the pictures from this novella, thank you, would you still consider it your favorite book of high school?
I wouldn't say it's my favorite book.
No, without
That
the
was the
pictures.
question.
Without the picture. Oh, wait. Now we have to backtrack all the way back to the start of this tangent. You're saying this isn't actually your favorite book?
No, it just came to mind because it was unique.
All right. Well, it does sound unique, but you kind of alienated the audience from.
I apologize.
Yeah,
I
yes,
apologize.
it is. I will give it a read. How long is it?
I
I'm
couldn't
gonna look.
tell you.
I could give you its ISBN number, but I don't know how long it is.
All right. Well, I think that we should put the squirrels away for a little while and maybe delve into a book that most people have read.
All right, yeah, let's do that. Let's okay. Well, let's talk about Shakespeare. How about that?
Oh, Shakespeare. The Bard. Ooh, love him.
The Bard. He barded it up.
So I'm gonna be real. I enjoy consuming Shakespeare on a stage, and I can appreciate.
You mean like you on the stage, or like watching other people on the stage?
I do enjoy myself on the stage, but I meant me in the house, me observing.
Samuel's in the house.
Indeed, but while I can appreciate reading Shakespeare, it's not my favorite. They're not my favorite stories to actually take to an English classroom. And I think a lot of people agree with that, even though some people don't. Some people are big fans, But I suppose I enjoyed Midsummer's Night and Romeo and Juliet. What is The Tempest? The Tempest was quite good.
Yeah, we read
The Tempest was good. Yes.
Oh, Matthew, why don't you speak on your feelings on The Tempest?
Great movie. It's a great movie.
It was a good movie. Which brings me back to my point of how movie adaptations of books compare to books. But I'm trying to remember all that happens in The Tempest.
There's an
written by
island.
Shakespeare.
There's
There is
a
a
fella
tempest.
who is not attractive, and then he's a monster, and there's also a wizard lady, witch,
And then there's also Caliban.
and then there's a storm, and then he comes out of the ground, and he's.
Wait, does he come out of the ground? Is that part of the story?
I remember seeing an English teacher of mine played a video of Caliban coming up on the ground during a stage performance. But regardless.
Oh, we watched a video with Penn and Teller. about
Yes,
the
yes,
Tempest.
yes.
That was weird. Why did we watch that?
I feel that what I'm trying to recall though is I feel that Shakespeare often puts a sort of there's a moral or a hidden meaning, not a hidden meaning, but a moral to the story, and or like the story is supposed to be a representation of something else, and what the Tempest was trying to say there. I can't remember.
So,
I don't know if
so
guys do.
are you a believer that Shakespeare had meanings in his works? I'm sorry.
A bold statement, I know, but yes, I am.
Okay. So if we treat Shakespeare as a creator and a storyteller with intention,
Mm-hmm.
what would you consider his intentions to be? You can pick anyone because I know we're not super tight on the we're not super tight on the Tempest. So if you have another play that you would like to speak on in a
What's your
What-
favorite Shakespeare play?
What are his intentions?
Oh boy.
Well, I the only one I recall best is in Midsummer Night's Dream. It's like there's a clear message or a message, regardless of how clear it is, of like it's what happens when people fall in love too quickly, or like the follies of young adults, and how it's something about
But,
it
I
all
mean,
being a dream. I'm really struggling to.
Frozen also has that similar message, and I
Frozen
honestly, I
does
think,
have a very similar message.
and so I think that's actually a good question. Is it just as valid to learn that lesson from Frozen?
Or watching The Lion King instead of reading Hamlet.
That's a good point. That is good point. I mean, that's one of the upsides of plagiarism, is that you get the same.
Yes, we do. We do not support plagiarism on this podcast, but we do mention it.
Oh, guys, I invented a new word:
What?
plagiarism.
I think that a lot of people, I really don't think that well, geez, I'm about to like touch into education inequality, which is a big topic, and that's something we don't really have time for today. But Shakespeare isn't really accessible for the most part, storytelling, I wouldn't be able to read Shakespeare comfortably if I wasn't taught it in a classroom at first, at a young age. And I think that having the opportunity to, consume a story in animation form with lions and singing and action and all that stuff, that could be fun. So I do think it's warranted to consider stories reflected in, more consumable forms of art. Indeed.
So does that I think that goes back to what we were talking about in the first part of this podcast about, what level of maturity do you have to be to consume, a story. And Matthew brought up the point of you have to have the vocabulary and you have to be able to understand it and consume it. And you have to, in the case of Shakespeare, you have to you often have to have the education. You have to have been taught how to read Shakespeare, and have practiced it. So does that another sort of devil's advocate, does that mean that we should sort of phase out Shakespeare because it's just so hard to read?
No, I think I do disagree with that, and I think we all disagree with that. He's one of the most enterprising, revolutionary storytellers that I'm going to say the world has ever seen, which is a cliche colloquialism, but I'm going to use it. And I think that it's important to note him. And a lot of like the rule of threes, the way inciting incidents are structured in films and television shows that we see today, a lot of that revolves around how he treated storytelling. So I do think it's really important to be able to consume like some of the most raw in innovative forms of the most raw innovative stories that kind of rolled out the red carpet for creators to come. I think that it's important to definitely start there in education and build off of it.
I mean, there have been a lot of sort of modern day language translations of Shakespeare. So I suppose my question is more about do you think that we get more out of Shakespeare because the language is hard to understand? I think that's actually sort of a personal question. I have in like for me personally. That I brought up earlier, Emily Dickinson poems, and that they're really just puzzles to unwork and find a meaning and find little bits and pieces there. But so do you think that there is more to be found in Shakespeare, or that there is more merit value in Shakespeare because of the effort required you have to put in to understand it?
I'm going to use a comparison that may seem a little silly, but I do genuinely think it. When you have things like iambic pentameter and your syntax is a little off, and it's not in free verse or in just like blanket clause literature, or in the style of blanket clause literature, it's like having grapefruit singular, like having grape juice or sparkling grape juice. One person may be partial to the other, one person may prefer the other, but sparkling grape juice, it's a little bit more, spunky. It's got a little extra oomph to it. So
does it now?
Sparkling grape juice, that's what you're gonna have on Thanksgiving. You're gonna put it in a champagne flute and you're gonna clink things.
I thought you were gonna say put it into champagne. No, it's just to defeat
the
purpose.
No. Alcohol is bad. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's another day.
So Matthew,
yeah. Actually, what are your thoughts on grape juice?
Have you read Shakespeare?
I have, actually, fortunately, so that we may be able to discuss a similar subject. I've actually played Shakespeare. That's a fun story. But
what did you play him?
What did I play him? What was that a coherent question? When did I play him?
What did you play him?
You play him some music?
No. Yes.
So when did you play Shakespeare? Give us the context. Paint the scene, as it were.
Well, I played as Shakespeare, who is dealing with a certain Delia.
A Shakespeare.
Can we name the work and the writer, please?
Sure, of
Just so
course.
we're not hearing
The
ignorance.
Bohemian.
Speaking of plagiarism,
the Bohemian Seacoast. Which
Bohemian
is
Rhapsody by Queen.
No.
Incredible song. You know, if we're going to talk about Freddie Mercury.
moving on.
gotta go-
In the Bohemian Seacoast, a Delia, I don't know her last name, who is convinced that
A Delhi.
Adele.
Sorry.
Like
Delia.
a deli sub? Were you a deli sub?
Delia something surname.
Oh, Delia.
Oh,
Delia.
yes. Delia, of course.
Sure.
So- that
He's
was- I
convinced
wasn't even
that
joking.
Shakespeare's plays is one of the greatest conspiracies and that he didn't write any of them and that they were in fact written by a combination of Francis Bacon and Queen Elizabeth and a whole bunch of other people. And she ventures forth to Shakespeare's tomb to prove her conspiracy.
How
and
by going
then,
to the tomb is she going to prove that he did
well,
not write what
she's
he wrote?
unsure. She's just hoping to find some sort of clue.
A
And
clue?
Shakespeare's corpse comes alive to
Whoa.
Now there's a clue.
reprimand.
That's a clue.
Are you saying Shakespeare's dead, but then he alive?
So you played a dead Shakespeare.
Yes.
Wait, was there dialogue?
Yes, and I admit when I first saw that I would be playing dead Shakespeare, I thought that I would lie dead, but he acts very much alive despite being dead.
That's an interesting theory that Shakespeare's plays were written by other people. But what about the theory that Shakespeare's plays were written by actually a different guy called Shakespeare?
Whoa. I believe that one.
So we've accredited the wrong Shakespeare.
Yes,
Interesting.
exactly. You know, William Shakespeare and Shakespeare are two very different entities.
Bill
Bill.
Nye.
You know, I
Science guy.
I-
Checks.
Anyway, so
wow. So you know what? I think hold on. Let's bring ourselves back in because this episode.
let's center ourselves.
Yeah, this episode is called Books We Read in High School. And I think that we'll have a little bit more fun toying with maybe our least favorite book, omitting Catcher in the Rye, because it's not, all three of us have not read it. I think that
Well,
we could.
Just to stick on the Shakespeare thing for one more second.
I want our audience to know, even though you can't see it, my one of my co-hosts, Matthew Johnson, is giving me a shoulder right now, and it's overwhelming. But continue, everyone.
So no, the one thing I wanted to say about Shakespeare is that, it's really in a different category. They're plays. They're meant to be put on a stage. So I just wanted to know, the actors in the room. I wanted to get your opinion on that. Is why is it that we can get so much more out of reading a Shakespeare play than seeing it live? And in fact, I would put forward that I would claim that you actually miss out on some of the acting by reading it and not seeing it live. There's no audio visual cues. So do you think that you get more or less out of Shakespeare if you read it?
Well, it certainly helps to have the body language, communicate whatever you can't understand. If the vocabulary is like beyond the vocabulary you have, if you're struggling to understand the text, it's going to be twice as effective to see stuff on stage. If someone's emotional about something, you can tell how they're feeling, even if you have no idea what they're saying, and it sounds like a foreign language too. That's half the battle with acting, as you can see through facial expression and body language. So yes, it's different. So I guess then to answer your question about the value of reading Shakespeare versus seeing it on a stage is it'll be easier to understand on a stage, but you'll get the value of the text of the language that much more out of reading Shakespeare, because you're really trying to take it word for word, rather than just seeing it.
I also want to make another comparison. I think that studying a light bulb is very different than studying a light bulb with a current running through it. When a play is on the stage, there's life in it, there's subjectivity, there is decisions. People are making decisions for his text. And looking at a light bulb that's on, you're not really looking at the filament and the mercury that's lighting up whatever a light bulb is made of.
Ooh,
like
Mr. Science guy.
It's different than studying like the structure and mechanics of how it will receive that energy versus studying how the energy runs through it. Do you kind of feel what I'm getting at there?
I think I get the analogy. I think I'm picking up on what you're putting down.
Yeah, I'm putting it down and you're picking it up. But yeah, I think that it's just different. And I think that if we're really going to study his work as Shakespeare's work, then it should be studied not on stage. You know, it should be studied at the raw text because a story is the script. The actors just kind of breathe life into it and let it be a little bit more consumable for the audience.
Oh, just that was kind of a throwaway. I
think acting should be a humbling job. It's like you're not really doing much. You're just making someone's story come to life.
That seems
I
like
act. I'm allowed to say it.
That's true, and I don't. So
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. It seems like the actors in this in the room, as it were,
All three of us
unanimous.
are actors, and I think that if we really look at acting, you know, what we'll find is that we act.
One of my favorite books from high school that I've read was Beowulf.
And why was that?
Beowulf, interesting. You know, we
It
opened
was a
with
good book.
a mention of one of the critters' names in
Critters. Oh. And yeah, so why was that, Matthew?
Beowulf. Why was that, Matthew?
Did you like the tragically depressing funeral at the very end?
Oh, a Viking's funeral. Nothing like it.
And I just appreciated like the poetry of it, the epic poetry and the prose of Beowulf.
Beowulf himself.
No, you can't. Not the visceral poetry. I don't think that's a thing. There's no physical poetry in the individual, but of the language of the writing.
You know, I think that Beowulf, it's like one of my most what I consider one of the most entertaining books of high school, but it's not my favorite. You know, it's not that special. It's just kind of like watching someone play a video game. But, you know, a lot of video games are based off the structure and, you know, imagery of that book. So fair enough to it as an entity of its own. Yeah, sentence that I finished. I think that we talked about in part one that we were going to address toxic masculinity, and I think toxic masculinity comes up a lot in Beowulf, or at least comes up and is not addressed or made much of a commentary on. A lot of we see a story driven and completed by violence, and I'm not sure. Do we get? I don't remember well enough. Do we get a lot of humanity out of Beowulf as a character? Because I remember mostly just we do actually. Yeah, you're right.
I think we just have a different standard for what is quote humanity, but I think but it's interesting that you sort of bring that up because I think we were talking earlier in the last part of this podcast about how the books we read in high school don't glorify high society, but I do think in a sense Beowulf glorifies one specific way of life. One's glorifies the genealogy, the bloodline, and glorifies the honor, the and sacrifice and battle and war and masculinity. I mean, to be fair, it's in a totally different era than the other books we read, but nevertheless. Nonetheless, we read it all the same. So,
yeah.
But yeah, so masculinity in that. Where do we see that come up? Do you think that Romeo was being masculine when he in his story?
Well, no, that's heavy. But I think that the real issue is because toxic masculinity is. Yeah, it's
toxic.
It is toxic, but it's also more of a individual entity, and I think entity may constitute being an individual on its own. But it's mostly that masculinity is always, I'm going to say juxtaposed again. Masculinity is juxtaposed with heroism, and winning the story, being the driving force, being a protagonist that not only outbeats the antagonist but outbeats his own demons, and that's what allows him to have an actual character arc and end up at the top of the story. And I think that it's too often that we see that the only way to get through and win a story is with masculine characteristics and features and ways of being, and like this vulnerability and sensitivity that we don't get out of a lot of our protagonists, and at least early literature, is should be addressed in a school setting, because kids shouldn't have to consume Beowulf, for example, and think that they can solve all their problems, all the demons in their lives, if we're speaking literally of the reflections the books makes, with violence, you know?
Yep.
I heard a dog barking, and I think that
Oh.
actually leads us into a nice topic that we haven't covered yet, and that is,
The importance of being earnest.
yes, exactly, because there is not a dog in that book. But Harold, I know for a fact that is one of your favorite novels that and I know we read that actually in the same class in high school, which makes this even more
I have
interesting.
no memory of that, but no, I do remember really enjoying the book.
I sat next to you every day.
What grade was that?
Sophomore.
You were in that. Well, that's a whole different thing. But no, I really enjoyed that play, that book. Oscar Wilde, very cool dude. I actually went to his grave in Paris. It was pretty cool. They had to put glass around it because people were getting concerned that too many people were kissing his gravestone. That it was going to be like a health hazard. But yeah, but people would just kiss the glass anyway. Anyway, that's unrelated. But no, I think a lot of it just had to do with just the humor. I think it really, really tickled me.
Do I hear birds? Also, slight tangent. What was the slogan? What brand owned the slogan "Respect the Punch"?
I'm sorry.
Fruit Punch.
Fruit Punch. What was your favorite drink growing up?
Growing, I'm still growing.
Matthew, are you
really
thinking?
really thinking about it here. Fanta for me.
Lemonade, because I drank it with one of my favorite books, which is the subject of this podcast.
I was just gonna take us on a genuine tangent, but all right. I was personally gonna say, what is a Capri Sun?
I think it's like fruit punch, just like in a little pouch.
Oh,
It doesn't have to be fruit. It doesn't
awesome.
have to be fruit punch flavored.
Also, when you finish it, you could like blow it up, and then it would be like a little balloon.
Yes,
that's true. But also, fruit punch isn't itself a flavor. You can have different kinds of fruit in a punch.
That is.
I don't know where the punch flavor comes from, though.
Well, punch is like a combination of liquid.
Oh, I was like, no cap, very like genuinely always concerned how they got the punch flavor in it.
no cap.
Interesting. Back to books.
Back to books. Back to me.
Matthew, we're gonna put you on. Back to me. But Matthew, we're gonna put you back on the spot. Sure. What was your least favorite book? Because you talked about your squirrel adventure one that was.
It was an adventure.
Yeah. What's your least favorite book that you read in high school?
My least favorite book that I read in high school. I would say The House of Mirth, maybe. I remember struggling to stay engaged with that book, so I think that was part of it.
Engagement. Engagement. We haven't talked about it yet. How important do you guys think it is for books to be engaging? Because a lot of high school students, at least in my experience, they're saying they're reading it, but they're ending up on Schmoop. You know what I mean? So I think it is important that we picked novella that is not only educational but entertaining. And I think that. Whoa! No! Speak.
An example response I have to that is when I performed in The Secret Garden, I read the book to prepare for it, and the book has a very
novella actually.
Yes, thank you. The ending lacks engagement, for lack of a more articulate description.
What do you?
I would say that the book, all in all, is a wonderful storyline, and it's very touching and sweet. And there is a substantial plot there, but it takes a while to get there. There's a lot of description, and a lot
exposition.
Of yeah, it's a lot of not much exposition though. I felt like a lot of description of driving in a car to get to the destination. Quite literally.
How long are they in a car?
Too long, it
I
seems.
couldn't tell you. It was several pages, but it was like
Wow.
one or two chapters where there was slight exposition, which was necessary to the storyline, but it felt like a lot of description getting to this estate where the rest of the story is going to take place. Um, so I guess it raises the question of how important is engagement. Is it important to engage the reader, really hook them in, as if you're writing like the introductory paragraph to an essay, you know, and make sure you hook the reader in? Because the only reason I'd say I kept reading that book was because in a way I needed to and I wanted to, and I knew from its reputation that it was a good book. But if a book is trying to make its own reputation, is it really important to have that hook at the beginning, or is it just like you're taking a gamble if you're hoping the reader's going to keep going?
I think well, a couple things there. I'm a firm believer that that engagement is largely in control, or the reader is in control of their own engagement to a certain degree. I think, but I do think that I do want to bring up the fact that books can be less enjoyable when you have to read them by a deadline, or you're forced to read them for, you know, for a school project or something. So is that something? I mean, I've encountered that personally, but I was wondering if have you guys encountered that you enjoy a book less when you have, you know, when you're supposed to read it for a class?
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, I think that a lot of people, when they're told to do something, they are less inclined to do it. And that's deeply ironic, and I don't really know the mentality around that, but it's true. I think it's true for most people, even in regards to things that aren't reading. And
Well,
well, okay, Matthew, you can go ahead and say something if you're
I was
so
going to say,
inclined to.
thank you. I'd say a sense of control is really important in the human condition, I guess, as it were. So yeah, it's I guess that sort of affects how people feel about a book when they're forced to read it or not, because it was less of a choice and less control, and yeah, feeling
Yeah,
controlled isn't as nice.
yeah, it is not as nice. But I do think one interesting thing that happened in one of my senior classes was we were all given an opportunity to read books that we um, chose ourselves. Forgive me, I'm just thinking of something comical. Let me tell a joke because I now everybody needs to know what I think is so funny. So a giraffe and a hippopotamus walk into a bar, and the giraffe sits down, but you know he's having trouble because his neck is so long. And the hippopotamus says, yo, dude, what are you gonna do? And the giraffe says, I don't know. That's my joke. So anyway, I had a class senior year where Harold, did you have something?
I have a bunch of things.
I'm sure you do. Let me quickly go into this now that I've
So
already
what class did you take this past year?
women and gender studies, actually. So you know, we were given an opportunity during the class where we got to pick our own books to read. It was a open book club, and then everyone read books that they chose themselves, and then wrote a book review on them, and then shared them with the class. And then if anyone else was so inclined, they could like a review and then go pick up the book for themselves and read it. And I think that opportunity to pick what we want to read and then kind of read it on our own schedule over the course of a month was really enjoyable for a lot of people. And I think that I'm not sure how conducive. What's that word? Conductive?
Which word are you looking for?
Like beneficial?
Conducive? Yeah, I
I'm not,
think
I'll just say
conducive
beneficial. I'm not sure how beneficial kind of that open curriculum would be for, you know, your classic English class. You know, like if everyone's picking their own books, maybe you have to read some things, and you shouldn't always just be able to read what you want. So maybe that decision shouldn't be given to a student,
No,
especially
I
not
agree.
before senior year.
I think no, I was having a conversation with an educator of mine, I suppose I'd call her, a few years ago about the curriculum in high school curriculums when it comes to the books that are read in English classes, and I made the comparison to the songs that we sing in our choir. That you know, there are some great classics, Moses Hogan, for example. I mean, we don't have to get into music, but some great sort of high school classics, you may call them. Um, but um, but you know, by and large, you trust the choir director to choose the pieces that we sing, because you know, you trust their expertise, and you know, they know their class, they know their choir, and what voices they have to work with. So I think I think that that's a large part of being a choral director. So I think that that can translate to being an English teacher, that at least to some degree, that, part of being an English teacher is having that kind of expertise to make those decisions as to what books you read. And so I think, I would definitely trust my English teachers to pick the books that we read.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Actually, your point kind of made me feel less confident about my, option comment that I made about people choosing what they read. And I do think you're right, that should only be this kind of small window of a curriculum, and that most of it should be chosen by people that know more than us, because often in a school, we're not the smartest person in the room. And
that's what education is, if you ask me.
We
did ask you. So thank you for that.
Matthew.
Yes.
Can I just pose a question for you?
Sure.
So you're given the opportunity. Do you know what Infinite Jest is, the book?
I don't believe so.
Okay, Google it. Everybody Google Infinite Jest, because we're going to get a little bit more.
Our listeners can do whatever they want to.
Yeah, you're right. Listeners, I apologize. You do not need to Google Infinite Jest. That was mostly for my co-hosts. So Infinite Jest is a 1996 novel, and it's known for being notoriously long and, something that you have to plod through and work through. But it's considered this landmark of success for a writer, or at least, self-education for someone who writes. You have to finish Infinite Jest. My brother, who is a writer of sorts, one of my brothers, took almost like a whole summer to finish the book because it's so dense. So I'm lost.
No, I
can't
think it's
find
similar.
My way back.
Well, just to give you a second there, I think a similar thing can be said of the Brothers Karamazov, which is a book I'm in the middle of reading. That there are these books that are considered not just classics in their own right, but classics for in the sense of functionality, in the sense of they give you more direct instruction than something like Huckleberry Finn. That it's sort of like War and Peace. It's like it's a tome. That it's a real undertaking, but it's I feel like the only reason I would read it is so that I said that I read it, but
yeah,
I'm sure that I'd probably get something out of it.
Mm-hmm. And you actually, thank you for condensing my point. It's that idea of reading something just to have read it that kind of puts me off from some of the books that may be chosen, especially in a college setting, in college curriculums, where it's not about a character study or a study of the use of language and the craft that they use to tell their story. It's more about
intellectual
books that are just, thank you. Pride, almost, if you could consider that pride. And I think that those are something those have to be read on your own time, or else they're not really, I don't think they're warranted in an educational setting. Like someone who picks up Infinite Jest has to be, I want to read Infinite Jest. This is something I'm going to do because I want to. It shouldn't be handed to a student and say, hey, you should read this just because this is something you should have read. Like that whole idea of like, you should read this because it's like a standard in society. I think that's a little silly. And I think that we really should pick and read books off their warrant as stories and pieces of, a writer's craftsmanship.
I have a couple questions there then though, because do you think that mentality applies to, Of Mice and Men, Romeo and Juliet, Beowulf, like these other classics that we read in high school?
I think that what we keep hearing that we're saying ourselves is that these classics that we consider are these starting points for genres, for themes, for structural decisions and choices. And like we were talking about Beowulf, like almost a lot of video game structure and design and imagery is based off Beowulf. We were talking about Of Mice and Men. That's one of the first times we see this character study where this gentle giant theme comes in, and this idea between the blurred lines between good and bad. And these are all starting points, not pointses. And I think that their importance doesn't come from them just being a classic. It comes from them being innovative and works of literature that, changed something or did something new. Not all of them. Some people just pick bad books and they're just bad books, but some of them.
What defines a bad book?
What defines a bad book? Bad writing, bad storytelling, lack of structure.
Could you use the definition without the word in the definition?
You defined it, yeah.
A bad book.
That's like saying a bad cake is made with bad flour and bad eggs.
a bad book lacks clarity, structure, and intention.
Tension.
But I mean, to what degree is that an individual decision? Can any book, any piece of literature, be determined a good book by someone who likes it?
I should say it was interesting. I get a Quora, like random feed in my email sometimes, and I read one, and someone asked, what makes a bad book, and they said, or like what if you're reading a book, what do you see in it that makes you like put it away and return it to the library? And some of the things this person mentioned was, one, using a mirror as a cheap way to physically describe a character. Another was
Cliche? Are you just going to delve into cliches?
Yes.
No, I'm not. Since you said that, I'm not going to delve into cliches.
Because that would be a cliche.
Samuel,
I don't know what a cliche is.
that
My only point is, I think that you get a lot of bad books when someone's just writing about something that has no, substance to it. Like, oh, let's read about the apple that fell off the tree and then a horse ate the apple. There's no
Hey, but
intention.
Newton figured out he wrote a really cool book after an apple fell from a tree.
Name the
that's
book.
true. Gravity.
I mean, the Bible was sort of written after an apple fell from a tree.
Yes, the novella Gravity. Sorry, excuse me. Okay, anyway, my point is, there are rules of structure and storytelling. There is clarity that makes
I
a
say
story
that's my favorite book.
That bit is over. We are moving on. We are leaving the apple on the ground and the horse is going to eat it later. No.
No.
The horse doesn't come back.
Okay. Let's go back to gender and sexuality, and because that's what we said that this part of this podcast was going to be about.
You're right.
How-
We've grown too tangential.
How do the subjects? Why don't we talk about a book that we haven't talked about really yet? To Kill a Mockingbird.
Whoa.
Haven't really discussed it.
Oof.
Is that a book that you read so that you can say that you read it?
No, I don't think so.
Can I ask off the bat, since I'm struggling to remember what the book was like, what is the source of the title? Like, what's the meaning of the title in To Kill a Mockingbird?
Do you remember what the book is about? Because we can give you that, and then that will explain the symbolism in the title.
Sure.
Atticus Finch must defend an African-American man who's been accused of raping a white woman, falsely accused. And his daughter, Scout, is the one that we see observing it from a child's perspective. And we see Atticus build his case and then defend his client. And ultimately have to defend a man simply because of the color of his skin. And
So
Right.
sorry. So in essence, To Kill a Mockingbird is sort of a mockingbird being a symbol of innocence and a symbol of immaturity, I suppose, and eyes being blind to the world, in a sense. So it's To Kill a Mockingbird is the killing of innocence.
Got it. And I think that gender representation is unfair. There's a lack of gender representation. We see ultimately literature dominated by men and white men, and I think that that's partly due to that just systematic sexism and oppression that has existed in America and across the world for forever how long. And it comes up in storytelling because the only people that could write during a time were powerful white men. And as that grew, stories became ultimately centered around powerful white men. And the interesting thing about To Kill a Mockingbird is they offer a young female perspective addressing the court case, addressing Atticus. And people in storytelling, it is considered in storytelling that we often choose children as our narrators or observing protagonists because they are inherently easier to empathize with, because we can all relate to the innocence of youth and the ignorance of youth, and we can all find pieces of ourselves in a child for the most part, because children are kind of forgive me I misspoke, but children are I hate to say children are generic, but childhood is generic. Everyone can see themselves in childhood and empathize with it, and that's why we often choose them as vessels in storytelling. And I think that it's important.
Also easier to make their narration more unfiltered and unbiased.
Yes, another great point. But I think why To Kill a Mockingbird is special is because we see the issues. We see systematic racism and oppression through exactly a very unfiltered lens, and it shows us just how trivial and unfair it is. Seeing a young girl look at a African American man be falsely accused, a biased jury, and a world that's pitted against him, all she can ask is why? And eventually Atticus has to explain that it's simply because of the color of his skin. And that's like the big turning point, and that's the not even an exciting incident, that's the climaxing incident where she actually starts to come to terms with the society around her. And it's revolutionary because no author really had the, spunk, courage to go out and just has. Correct.
Audacity.
Audacity is a better word. Yeah. No, I'm going to say courage. Courage has a bit more of a heart to it. Had the courage to just take something at face value and be like, yeah, that's wrong. And if I give you a child observing it, she's going to see it as wrong because that's what it is. There's no way. There's no gray area. It's black and white.
I think that there's a lot of similarities to be drawn between To Kill a Mockingbird and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Actually,
Yeah.
I think that, especially because of that sort of the lens of it through the eyes of a child, because it's and I think that what they both sort of make their readers realize is that by way of sort of empathizing with the character, you sort of forget the innocence of your own youth, and you realize, especially with these moments like I described with Huckleberry Finn on the raft of seemingly, like weird questions that you wouldn't expect, unexpected questions, like that seems so straightforward now that now that we're older. Like it seems so straightforward to like, oh, what's the right thing to do? Like follow the law, or like is being nice what's important? Like sort of these things that we feel like we have an understanding of, to go back, to be taken back to our own childhood, to when we didn't have an understanding of these things. So I think that that's, you're exactly right, that's how, the seeing a protagonist who is a child experience the world and going through your own youth again really gives you a new perspective.
Yeah, I agree.
As do I.
That's pretty cool. Imagine if that happened in English class. Like you say something and everyone's just like, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that would be pretty dope.
That would be pretty dope.
If we are getting towards the end of our time here, and I don't know if we have any last points we want to make about books we read in high school, but if we're gonna say the episode's called Books We Read in High School, we can't get around the elephant in the room. Shrek 2. Shrek 2 is good, but not a lot of people like it. A lot of people say you should end it at Shrek 1. And Shrek the musical, God forbid. But Shrek 2 stands alone as a film that not only makes a social commentary on, alienation in society and inequality regardless of socioeconomic status, but where you live, geographic isolation, swamps.
And how you look.
And how you look. And the kind of animal you are, and if you're magical or not. And
the color of your skin.
I think that Shrek 2 is just as important as Romeo and Juliet or Beowulf, and it should be up there with the big boys. And it may not be a book, but there is a screenplay.
What defines a big boy? Like, what does it take to become a big boy? To be acknowledged by English teachers as worthy of being on the curriculum?
I think that a story that is revolutionary, innovative, and powerful should be considered a
classic.
Yes,
a classic.
So what I'm saying right now is that you print out a bunch of the screenplays of Shrek 2, you put those boys in 3-ring binders, and you just start handing them out. That's the first book you read in high school.
You get a Shrek 2, you get a Shrek 2, everybody gets a Shrek 2.
Everybody gets a Shrek 2. You
Me
get
too.
a Shrek 2.
A Shrek 2 too.
No, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people, I think a lot of stories are slept on, just like a lot of creators are slept on, There's a big well of things to pull from and educate with, but we often only pull from the surface.
So, what were your thoughts on the fact that not Great Gatsby, what is it called? Great Expectations. That was close. It starts with the same word. What were your thoughts on the fact that Great Expectations has been pulled from the regular reading list?
You know, I was a big fan of Great Expectations personally. I found it entertaining, and I thought it was a very compelling drama. But, you know, I think that you can get a lot of the same things in other books, and
Shrek too.
Exactly.
In all seriousness, I will say that going back to Squirrel Adventures, that was sort of the point of you know, having Flora and Ulysses in there, is that like it's not a conventional book you consider one of the greats for a classic to have up there on the syllabus for the semester. So it's sort of like, you know, incorporating Shrek 2 or whatever, except it's squirrel time.
You're right, man.
You were saying
no, but Great Expectations.
Yes.
I think that it gets down to that point where you can find pieces of Great Expectation in other things, and you can find pieces of specific other stories in Great Expectations. Like it's a little simple, cliche. Am I allowed to say Great Expectations is cliche? Like, it's important, but I don't think there's not that much enterprising storytelling that actually happens in it.
The criminal is the benefactor.
Hey, no, it isn't. I don't even know.
Harold, it sounds like you're a little far away from your mic.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that.
All right.
I think no. But I we did give the disclaimer that that there were going to be a few spoilers, so I can't be too upset. But no, I think that it was a good decision to get rid of to sort of archive it from the set of classics. Yeah, I think that it's mostly important just because we need to make room for all of these new books coming in. I think one of the exactly like things like Shrek, although we may be a few years off from that momentous occasion. But yeah, we're definitely moving in the right direction. I think no, but I have to say that, you know, one of the greatest semesters of my, you know, high school English career has been you know, reading more recent books. And in fact, we read a couple plays in my junior year that were actually being put on that semester in a couple of playhouses in Baltimore. So I thought that was pretty cool, that, you know, and especially being able to compare things like that. So yeah, no, so I think it's good to make room for the newbies. And hopefully one day
continue.
We'll get to Shrek 2.
Yeah, I agree. Well, anyway, we're nearing the end of our time, and, you know, this is free soda, so we have to end our podcast with a big, you know, controversial question. And my two co-hosts don't know what the question is going to be, but I'm going to lay it down right now. And starting in about, when I ask it, we're going to have 1 minute to discuss and argue. And whoever comes up on top, the audience will decide. So is controversy, is pineapple good on pizza?
Yes.
No. Defend yourself, Matthew, because you're 2-1 right now.
It's very subjective. It is very subjective.
Whoa. There's no such thing as subjectivity. There is only right and wrong. So let's do this right here.
Well, I will say the Latin phrase "de gustibus non est punctandum" means everyone has different taste. So
Expelliarmus to you too.
Why did you have to say it in Latin?
Because it's a Latin phrase I've heard.
Well, I'm pretty sure you just translated it to English, so therefore now it's an English phrase too. So let's start there next time.
Anywho, pineapple is subjective, particularly when put on pizza.
Pineapple is subjective.
It is subjective. Here's my thing. There's no reason to bring the acidity of a pineapple onto a tomato, onto a bread base, a tomato.
Yes, but when the pineapple is baked, the acidity is taken away from it. It's mostly sweet.
Putting raw pineapple and baked pineapple are two very different things, but they're both still wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, but there's I think there's very little acidity.
You just disproved yourself.
I think there's very little acidity with when the pineapple is baked on the pizza.
But let me ask you this.
Do you want sweetness?
Hold on.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand. I feel like the argument that you're coming at here with is that it's sort of an acceptable thing. Like you can do it. But do you really think that pineapple actually add something to pizza? Do you think that a cheese pizza is improved by putting pineapple on it?
It can be. I mean, the reason why I say it's subjective is like I, as someone who has many a time ordered pineapple pizza, like I enjoy it. I have times where I'm like, no, I don't want pineapple pizza and so that's how I feel like some people may like, I never want pineapple pizza or I always want pineapple pizza, but it depends how you're feeling. And it's a nice juxtaposition when you're in the mood for it because it compares it puts together a sweet flavor with salties.
But
and if you have ham on there, it's extra salt to compensate for that sweetness which you put on there, which is the Hawaiian flavor.
But some people put peanut butter on pizza, but does that make it
nope.
right?
Yeah, and I'm just gonna say, if you want your pizza sweet, why don't you put icing on it and be just that person?
No, because you don't want it all sweet. It's just like a little I don't know.
Nibble? What do you want to say?
Nibble.
No, it's a
Little extra bit of
a
tang.
little bit of sweet.
But why pineapple and why not any other fruit?
Yeah.
Why not have apple on your pizza?
Or
That's a good
strawberries.
point.
Oh, strawberries.
I'd say the texture and the consistency. That's what I'd say. Because
The
strawberries is
texture
very
of pineapples is terrible.
That's
okay.
facts.
When baked though, it's soft, and the strawberries have a lot of seeds. You don't want seeds or raspberries. Raspberries are
You
very
say
acidic
this.
and seeds.
You say this like you've tried this before. I'm concerned.
Have you ever eaten a strawberry?
No, but yes, I have. I have eaten a strawberry.
That's good.
I've
Then you
never
would
tried
Strawberries
it on
don't
a
have
pizza.
seeds, do they?
They're on the outside. Yeah, they do.
Really
I'm
interesting.
gonna pretend you didn't say that.
No, not noticeable seeds. Like,
Yes. Look up a picture of the strawberry.
I've eaten a strawberry 100 times. The only thing you can't eat on a strawberry is the stem.
Mm-hmm. So you eat the
Yeah, but
seeds
you
too.
eat the seeds too. Yeah,
You mean those
you eat
little,
this.
like those little fellas that are all over the thing?
You eat the seeds in
Yeah,
watermelon.
Those are seeds.
Yeah, so I don't get why that's a concern.
What?
I guess it's not. With raspberries, it's like it's noticeable, but you're not gonna put raspberries on pizza because that would be way
All
too
right,
sweet.
let's tighten
There's
this up because
seeds in
we're way over our
pineapple.
time. We're way over our time.
I
You get one
apologize.
pizza. Last
One
pizza you
pizza?
ever have. Matthew.
Cheese.
Do you put pineapple on it?
I would not.
Yeah. There we go. There we go.
Unless I'm
Right.
really in the mood.
Nope,
It
nope.
depends.
Whoa.
Nope.
What is that? No. You answered. It's over.
Hmm.
Someone write down the tally on Matthew's name.
Either way, okay. Wait,
are we re-
let's. So this concludes our part 2 of and the final part of our podcast. Books we mostly read in high school.
Thank you, everybody.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Good morning.